basically, we went to drink ayahuasca with Mama Maestro Juanita last night. A little bit tired, stumbling over my speech, but it was absolutely remarkable. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my entire life. I've drank ayahuasca with Kofan and Quichua and Shuar and a lot of European shamans, and I definitely was entirely on a completely different level than any of that stuff. Not to say that none of those people were good, but Juanita was easily the most connected to what she was doing, the most powerful. Um, I'll do my best to describe what happened in a minute, but just to get into the story a little bit. I was at the Shipibo market the other day, which, by the way, that we were informed when we were out there with Maestro Wanita that the municipality is trying to shut them down. They're going to shut them down, so they're going to lose their market, which is really sad because it's kind of a fixture of Aikido's, and it's just a really wonderful. I mean, you guys have probably seen the artwork that I posted, which, by the way, we are creating a website to try to help them sell it, especially since they are not going to have their storefronts anymore, and a lot of them don't have internet presence. So just FYI about that. But I was at this market and I had the thought that I don't, we can't afford to pay one of these Shipibo masters to have ceremony with us. And that's a shame because I'd really like to know what that's like. And no sooner did I think that than a friend came up behind me and said, this lady Juanita over there is one of the most respected Shipibo Maestras. And he introduced me, and she almost immediately invited us out to her place to drink for free. And so last night we went out there. And the property is amazing. There are trails to hike for miles, wildlife everywhere. I saw this fly that had bird wings. I'm not even kidding. And they come out of its butt. So I'm walking along and I see these like angelic snow white wings flapping. No ayahuasca had been consumed yet. And I was like, what in the hell is that? And it landed on a tree. And so I walked over where I could see it more closely, and those feathers, the white feathers, were sticking out of its butt. And then it had like a caterpillar body and a housefly head. Um, so it was one of the most avatar things I've ever seen in my life. And the hiking trails are remarkable. It seems like the jungle trees here, that are famous for having their roots extended, above the ground. Um, are just that much weirder here. I don't know how to describe it. It's like more jungle than it is further up north. Somehow the aesthetic is like deeper or something. There was a giant sabo and all sorts of just remarkable plants. And so then we went back to the house. Hey, right on. Um, we went back to the house and chatted a little bit. And basically, the story is that they are. She has not been working with the public, which blows my mind after I saw what she could do last night. But she hasn't been working with people really for very long. So I guess she met some Colombian people and they've been sending a few people to her here and there. And so they've started to build, calling it a retreat center is going a little far, but some like rustic cabins. They've only got two built so far. They don't yet have a proper maloka. There's a ceremonial building, but it's not a round maloka. So she's trying to raise money um, to finish the place, and it's quite an honor to possibly be able to help facilitate that. Because that's who I'm looking for, the people that are really truly authentic and in it for the right reasons. And when I met Juanita, I immediately noticed how sincere she was. She had kind of a calmness to her that was so powerful it was like deafening, and very sincere. And I guess let's just fast forward to the ceremony. We started with a cup, and the first thing I noticed was that it was very fermented. And I did have a moment where I thought maybe I'd made a mistake because I've always been told that fermented ayahuasca is not okay to drink. Um, and I've always, if I detected any fermentation, I would boil it, boil the fermentation out. But then I thought, you know what? I bet she probably knows what she's doing because the locals all spoke so highly of her. So I laid down, and not much happened for the first hour. She didn't sing an ikaro for a long time because she's waiting for the medicine to start working. And I was just kind of, queasy and bored and thinking, like, I got 3 hours of sleep the night before. I had terrible insomnia. So, and also, we've been through a lot of difficulties. So it's kind of in, I don't want to say a dark place, but definitely a difficult place to start. And after maybe 30 minutes, she started to sing Ikaros, but they were kind of mild and muted. And, I was thinking, like, oh, well, I guess this isn't going to be that extraordinary. And then I went out to the bathroom and I came back and she said, would you like a second cup? And I was like, okay, sure. And it was from a different bottle. And this was very deliberate. The first cup, I think, is just to make sure that you're not going to have any weird reactions. Very mild, I think, deliberately. The second one was full of chunks of copy and super thick and really actually a lot easier to drink. Here in Ecuador, it's almost always red vine, and the red vine is much heavier. It's heavier on the body. I think there's a lot more tannins in it, so it's maybe even a little bit more toxic. You vomit a lot more. Actually, we didn't vomit at all, which um, usually when the medicine is like so strong that open eyes, there's entities everywhere in the room and whatnot, you're gonna vomit. It blew me away that we didn't vomit. Um, but so almost immediately after the second cup, I feel that DMT energy that I just absolutely hate. Like I'd hate that body load, and I was just absolutely shocked because the first cup was almost like nothing. I mean, I knew that I had drank ayahuasca, but very vague. And the second cup just slammed into me, and it was the first time in my life that I almost freaked out. I've never lost it on ayahuasca. I've drank hundreds of times, but I was actually kind of on the edge. Like, I kind of want this to stop because it was just so crazy and bright and real. Um, and I felt like, I don't know what's around the corner, if this is already what's happening. And the luminescence of the visions, I mean, I'm sure most of you guys have seen this before, but maybe not like this. I mean, it was incredibly lucid and clear and defined and bright. And I noticed that there were all these sort of squid like entities kind of hovering around me. And one of them, I was trying to get some answers about what had happened with this guest that we lost at a recent event. And at one point, I tried to ask one of these beings, and it kind of turned around and looked at me like it would have if I had just tapped some random person on the shoulder and started asking them questions they would have no way of having an answer to. That was really it was really weird, that it was like, why are you bugging me? And it just went back to what it was doing. Um, but so these entities are like all hovering around with tentacles draped all over my face and shoulders, and I'm thinking like some of them I didn't think I liked. So they felt like they were like evil, maybe, and others were neutral, and some seemed like they might be friendly. Um, and so I sat up, and Maestro Wanita is right in front of me, and she starts singing this like cleansing ikaro, and there's no way I'm going to do this justice, but she was more emotionally invested in what she was doing, I think, than I've ever seen any person under any circumstances. And there wasn't an ounce of like corniness to it. It's not like it was affected or phony at all. There's no, like, she was in it to win it. Like, her movements were so intense, and there was so much passion in it. And I could almost understand, even though she's singing in Shipibo Kanibo. Um, I felt like I could understand everything she's saying because all of these gestures that she's making, and I could tell that she was kind of saying either to these entities, I wasn't really sure at the time, or to like my darker parts, like, oh, you think this shitty thing about yourself, and then she would like make this gesture, like, oh yeah, well, and then she would say all the stuff that would, negate that idea. And this went on for 25 minutes or something. I mean, three different Icaros, and just right there every now and then, the Agua de Florida, and but yeah, I mean, just so personal and so powerful. And the sounds of the language and stuff. I mean, it just was. Like I said, I've drank with Schwar that I still my teacher's teacher. I consider to be a master level shaman. Um, and his Icaros are weird, like in the sense of seeming like they're genuinely interdimensional. There's one in particular where he's kind of singing low, and then it like shifts up like 3 octaves or something, and takes on a different rhythm, and then drops back down, and it's so alien, but it's very different, and it's almost a little bit menacing. You know, it's not this like forest elf, like friendly healing. When she was sitting up, back at her altar singing these Icaros, one of the things that really struck me is that, you know, a lot of the indigenous music, is mostly pretty simple, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's very basic. Um, and the Shipibo it was not like that. It was bluesy sometimes, and there were, um, like nuances and sophistication that you would not imagine that you would hear in that kind of context. Um, almost almost on the level of like a classical singer or something, targeting these extremely specific tones. And there's something happening with the tension tones, that's similar to like North Indian classical music, where there are certain tension tones that are targeted over and over again, and then you can sort of lean into the note that resolves with tremendous power. And it's in those moments. I mean, the Grateful Dead. I mean, we're hanging in there, man. It's definitely been a rough ride lately, but last night definitely made me feel a lot better, if nothing else. I mean, um, but yeah, what I was saying is just the mechanics of this music and stuff that just really, 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 um, incredible. And I don't know how well I can describe this, but you can tell that there's something about the oral aesthetic of these Icaros that connects with the interdimensional entity aesthetic in a way that is undeniable. And it's, like I said, it's very difficult to describe, but there's a connection between what you're seeing in this, wormhole to another dimension, and the sounds that is like there. It just leaves no doubt in your mind that this woman is profoundly connected to these entities, or whatever it is that they are. Um, but so, anyways, after she sits in front of me and sings, and that's another thing about these Icaros, they went on forever. I mean, the amount of energy that this woman put into this. Also, another thing I've noticed is that, a lot of most shamans, will just sing a song, and they'll, do something, and then they'll stop, and it's just silent. At least in the tradition that I worked in the Shuar way, it's like, song, silence, but the entire time she's puffing mapacho and spitting the miri, which is like this, um, defensive saliva that is said to be passed from one, maestro to another by mouth. So you actually like put it on your hand and stick it in the mouth of the, um, initiate, I guess. Uh, so she's spitting the miri, and the tobacco, and the this like actually it's the original Ikaro is just a sort of hum with smoke from the Mapacho. That's the original meaning of the word is it's Quichua. It means healing through smoke. So it's also a Ikaro, but it's just a tobacco Ikaro, not a song. The entire time. I mean, she was active the entire ceremony. I remember she did all this for free, um, which is also pretty remarkable. And so, okay, so back to the story about the cleansing. So, um, yeah, man, it definitely recharged me and let me let go of a lot of, but all right, so the cleansing, cleansing Ikaro, I've got all these tentacled spirits all over me, and remember they're not like faint; they're like realer than the real world by a good margin. And I wasn't super happy about it. It was a little weird the way they were kind of sticking their tendrils into my nose and um, a morning. So she comes over and starts doing this like the cleansing, and it goes on for 20 minutes or something, which I just couldn't believe it because it's not just that she's singing. She all these gestures in her face. I mean, she's all these motions and just completely possessed. I mean, there's no other word for it. There's no doubt in your mind that this woman is connected to something that is not of this world when you're watching this. Um, and very positive too. But then, okay, so she finishes, and I laid down and I noticed that all of those tentacled beings were gone. And in their place was this crystal clear, repetitive pattern of like this naked guy holding a heart floating in the clouds. So, and I felt um, so much better. And it was very short, actually. That was pretty much the end of it. Probably because it was for free and she wanted to go to bed. And she knew that we had a lot of experience and that we didn't really need her to be just sitting there watching us for the next, for 6 hours or whatever. Um, but yeah, of all of the ayahuasca ceremonies that I've ever attended, it was by far the most powerful and also just the most positive. I mean, I went in there feeling as bad as I ever have in my entire life. I mean, I witnessed a horrific tragedy recently. Um, we've had all sorts of financial things implode. I mean, in a way, it couldn't be a lot worse. I shouldn't say that because if I do, it'll get a lot worse. But you know what I mean. And so, I went in there feeling like a dead dog, or worse. And it was actually almost difficult to accept today that I could be feeling that much better. Just like walking around and thinking like how is it I know what ayahuasca does, obviously, but this extreme level of just feeling like fortified and rebuilt and like cleaned from the inside out and all that, um, never like this before. um, so we did an interview with her today, and I'll get that up. It was great, I think. We asked some pretty deep and weird questions that I don't, usually when people sit down and talk to shamans, it's more just about like the purpose of the medicine and whatnot. We kind of got into what the spirits actually are and, what they're doing and, whether they're, one of the things I've wondered about this is, are they around all the time? Because I've seen, wall to wall entities before where there's like giant ones peeling up, like opening a hole under the clouds and stepping out of it, and they're like 100 feet tall. And there's the hat man I've seen standing this one night in particular. There were thousands of them. And I remember just looking around and watching this. I didn't like it a whole lot either because it was just too much. It was just too many entities, too many weird entities. I just did, and they're just so real looking. Um, I just it occurred to me while I was looking at this. Is this actually how the universe is? These things are just everywhere all the time, and we just normally can't see them, or is this an overlay of another dimension? My partner Enrica last night suggested that maybe it's actually time that we're looking through, and these are like later forms of life in the universe. Let me catch up with the chat. How does Master Juanita feel about bringing the medicine to the U.S.? Like, would she come to the U.S.? I mean, probably if she was paid enough. I mean, that's usually the deal with that kind of thing. But we are organizing an event for sure. I'm gonna try anyways, because I really, this is the type of person that I'm looking to empower. If I can do anything with my little bit of internet clout, But in Ecuador, it was Mama Celia, a person that had lived uncontacted until she was 17 years old, totally off the radar, not commercialized, And Juanita, I'm catching just as she is becoming, a retreat, but there hasn't been a single full retreat yet. So she's really, as authentic as you could possibly imagine, and as yet uncontaminated by the industry. And I don't really see how you could possibly like corrupt her. I'm pretty sure she's all the way, whatever she is, it's not going to change, for the worse. Um, that was one of the things about watching her do this cleansing ikaro with me, is just the authenticity and the absolute total commitment and devotion to all of the emotions and the gestures. And I mean, and her little face was just so, sincere and adorable. It was killing me, man. I could not take my eyes off her. Normally I'm the kind of person that if someone did that to me, I would avert my eyes. You know what I mean? I wouldn't just like watch them singing at me, and you know what I mean? I don't know. It was fucking crazy. Um, and it just goes to show, as soon as you think you've seen everything, you realize that you still haven't seen anything, and that's encouraging. That helps us to keep going, knowing that the universe has remarkable surprises um, right around the corner all the time. And even, in your darkest moments, there very well may be one of the brightest moments that you've yet experienced right around the corner. And that's certainly what just happened to me, I feel like. Particularly the way I met her. I mean, for me to think, like, how are we going to find, an authentic master? Um, I don't think she has any problems with people bringing the plants to the U.S., but just as long as people know what they're doing. I mean, that's really the main thing. And there are different levels to knowing what you're doing. That's what I definitely learned here, because as I've said, I've drank with a lot of people that I definitely consider 100%, you know, capable. And anyone that's had ceremony with me, reports their lives are changed, and but there's no way that I have the kind of skill that Juanita does, and neither do any of the other shamans that I know. And I wouldn't have imagined that to be possible, because I've seen some remarkable stuff, with the he doesn't like for his name to be used, but this my teacher, he is routinely telepathic. I can be like that too. I think what happens is that after you have consumed a lot of ayahuasca, the filters in your nervous system are turned down, and so you're just much more inclined to receive, you know, subconscious feedback loop information. That's how I think it works. And I mean, I was once sitting with my eyes closed thinking about something very specific, that the German girl, should I ask her to tea? And I opened my eyes and looked over, and he's sitting there, and he goes, the German girl, ask her to tea, but by the river. Like, okay. and a bunch of times stuff like that. Like one time I could see through my third eye, through my forehead, and this mosquito came and landed and bit me. And when it bit me, I realized I was actually watching it. I was like, wait, that's real? So I waved my hands in front of my face and stood up and walked around with my eyes closed, and I could find the guardrail. And, I was seeing through my forehead. And when I saw him in the morning, he looks at me and he doesn't say, how was last night? Here's your breakfast or anything. He says, sometimes you can see through your forehead when you drink the medicine. So incidentally, I go home and I look it up, and it turns out that there um, are rods and cones, and your pineal gland is connected to the neovisual cortex. So it's totally plausible. I've also heard people suggest that the eidetic visuals that you see when you close your eyes when you have taken a psychedelic, that's what eye is looking. Um, and also, of course, the ayahuasca entities. It's unfortunate that all these people have piled in here because I've already told the story about Maestra Wanita. I don't know how many people actually go back and rewatch these things. I'm tempted to just start over and tell you guys again because it was just so ridiculous. Okay, but then this morning in the interview, so remember how I was saying that the entities, I wasn't really sure what to think of them. Um, I mean, I've seen these octopus kind. They're not octopus, but they have tentacles hanging around everywhere. I've seen them a dozen times at least. They're recurring characters. So it's not like they were new, but it was like the interaction was more real or something. So it got me thinking more about, like, what are these things, like, really, what are they? I mean, there was even a moment where I was thinking, like, maybe this isn't good at all. Maybe maybe this is like the devil. This whole ayahuasca thing is just, because it was just so goddamn weird. But then, so in the morning, I asked Juanita, um, these tentacled spirits, uh, what are they? Are they around all the time and we can't see them, or do they come when the medicine calls them, or what is that? Do you know what they are? And she said, of course, I called them to come and clean all of the bad energy and blockages and all this stuff. And she said the reason that you associated some of them with being negative is because they were full of all this negative stuff that they were cleaning off of you. And um, so I guess, according to her, they were called to fill themselves up with all of this stuff, and then she comes over and kind of banishes them um, afterwards. And like I said, after the cleansing Ikaro, uh, they were gone, every single one of them, and there was just this clear, happy image there of like a guy with a heart floating. There was a bunch of them. They were repetitive, like 15 little paintings all stacked together or something of this happy little person floating around. And another thing we have to look forward to, a question I get asked all the time on here is, how was ayahuasca really discovered? And no one really actually knows the answer to that question. Um, I mean, maybe they do. But Maestro Wanita said there is a story that the Shipibo have about how ayahuasca was really actually like how it happened. Um, and I mean, I don't know how many of you guys out there might have checked out Shipibo folklore, but man, there's some really wild ideas. They really are kind of like hobbits or something, like forest elf type people. And one of the things I've noticed here is that, unlike, alcoholism is a big problem in indigenous communities in both North and South America. A lot of the Quichua communities where we lived in Ecuador were just completely demolished by Punta. And with the Shipibo, I haven't seen that at all. Um, Everybody is really happy and authentic, and yeah, it's really, really good energy here, and it's funny because I always said that I would never go to a Iquitos because it's so commercialized. And what happens? I get invited to this Maestra's house for free, and she turns out to be 100% real, um, which it gave me a new definition even of what real is. Um, just the potency of that little woman, and she was very kind too, and the breakfast for us, and um, we ate some sort of little weird jungle animal for lunch, and really a tremendous experience. So I'm not exactly sure about all the details yet, and we can only do very small groups because she only has the two cabins, and each cabin can only hold one person or a couple. Um, so, if anyone's interested, I mean, I'm still, a little bit, I wouldn't say in shock, but, definitely extremely surprised um, to have experienced all that, especially under those circumstances of just having the thought, how am I going to find a master Shipibo Maestra to drink with us for free? And she basically just walks up and said, would you like to come to my place and drink for free? I mean, that's what I mean about these ayahuasca people and telepathy. You get really attenuated to just plucking stuff out of people's heads around you. It's one of the main reasons for abuse, or one of the not reasons, but it's one of the things that facilitates it, because people feel a profound connection with somebody that can just pluck stuff out of their heads. In fact, in Santa Cruz, California, there are street people that have learned to do this, and I'm 100% positive that it's real. I had been driving past the Hearst Castle in San Francisco. Um, no, not just driving past. I went in. I actually went in, and it was incredibly insane in there. And I thought, man, it would be awesome to play a gig in here. And so I drove to Santa Cruz, and I parked, and I was out walking. I'd never been there before. And this homeless guy with a guitar comes up to me, and he says, you know that gig you want to play at the Hearst Castle? My brother can arrange that for you. And I was like, what? And then I had been to this conference with Golden Light Eagle and like some of these other, I don't know what to call it. It's sort of like a group that, um, I don't know what to call them. They talk about this relationship that we have with the star tribes, and I guess messengers of the star tribes or something. And he started referring to them too. But I noticed he was referring to them as I thought about them, not by their actual names, because I didn't know what they were. And that's when I realized that he wasn't like channeling or something. He just had, um, he just had a subconscious feedback loop going. And I called him out on it. And I was like, you're just, and he's like, yeah, we call it sacred drinking. This guy taught us all how to do it a few years back. You just drink like one or two beers, you can't get too drunk, and then you can just kind of, and a lot of us have found ourselves being taken care of by, rich people that think we're their guru or something because we can pluck stuff out of their heads. I was like, that is just not cool. It's a psychic street people hustle. So I went into the gas station and I'm like, there's these street people out there. She's like, I know, they're psychic, but only some of them are really good at it. Only in California, that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about California. California is not another state, it's another state. it's, it's like you're not driving over a state line, you're driving over interdimensional lines. And if you're on the right wavelength, there's just nowhere on earth that is like certain parts of California in that regard. But somebody asked Raz, about whether they discovered ayahuasca uh, in a trance because of tobacco. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, I have my own theory about it, but I didn't. You're right. I didn't finish that story. Juanita said that there's a Shipibo story that tells how it happened, but it has to be told in a ritual setting, ceremonial setting, and it takes about an hour and a half. And so I'm really curious how I'm going to bait her into doing that with a camera on. But she was, she was tired of the interview went on for a while, and I wasn't trying to press her to, um, continue past 40 minutes or whatever. So I will try to get her to dredge up that story because I'm sure it's remarkable. Um, oh, and then I was going to say that my theory about it, because I come from basically a scientific illuminism background, Western mystery tradition, and I wouldn't even say that I come from that background so much as that I realized that that's kind of how you should approach this because we live in a physical reality with, everything that happens has some kind of mechanism of action or else it's not possible. And this is kind of what separates the Wutards from the actual initiates and adepts. Um, if you don't have the proper technique and protocol for uncovering metaphysical and mystical secrets, you just go off the rails on the Wuchu train, and it's not helpful to the individual or anyone around them when that happens. So the protection, one of the protective mechanisms that you can deploy to ensure that you stay on the rails of the Wuchu train, um, you have to be able to contextualize things and understand that nothing that is impossible actually happens. Magic does not mean that the rules to the universe are subjugated or eliminated or extricated. They are extrapolated. And so, what I mean by that is that to the profane, the magician or shaman may be so adept at working with the laws of nature that he seems to transcend them. But it's not a negation of natural law ever. It can't be. It's never what happens. Um, so everything that happens, long story short, has some kind of way to happen. If telepathy happens, it's because of entrainment, or it's because of subconscious feedback loops, or some other type of, thing is happening. Something facilitates it. Um, well, my theory of light and consciousness doesn't really belong to me. It's like the universal thing. Um, but I think I might have actually contributed to understanding how it actually physically works, which is kind of what I'm getting at now. That um, the biophoton theory of ayahuasca is still my favorite because research has, they've looked at this and they have tested whether it's possible for different species to communicate with biophotons, and it is for sure. Um, so nature has a tendency to de-emphasize and devolve traits that aren't being used. And so when the European and Asian monkeys cut ourselves off from nature, we stopped listening to the information from the biophotons. And biophotons are little packets of light that are emitted by every square centimeter of living tissue, plant or animal, um, uh, at a rate of like 300 per second or something. So there's all this information showering all over all of the living tissue, and it has been well established that communication happens in this way between the DNA, directly between the DNA of other interspecies, right? So the mixing of plants that is highly, unlikely could very well be um, could very well be DNA to DNA transmission of information via biophotons. Um, and so when the indigenous person says, what white man, you don't talk to the jungle? What they actually mean is, you've lost your ability to, consciously receive information from these biophotons. They don't have a language for it, but that's what that's what scientific illuminism, I guess, and the Western occult and mystery tradition is really about. Figure out what is actually happening in the universe. It's not beyond our understanding. It's just, you know, it's it's a matter of different disciplines intersecting at the right moment for the right reasons, in the right way. And then when two things of differing natures intersect, the alchemical process happens, and a third thing of a higher nature emerges. And so, when science and mysticism or shamanism really truly connect, um, we that's when these understandings of significantly higher nature occur that are actually meaningful, And a lot of people kind of say, like, well, what's the point intellectualizing this stuff so much? There's a huge point. One of our biggest problems with converting the masses and getting them to escape their matrix constructs, and wake up and actually become fully human, or more than human even, is our inability to convince them, to listen in the first place. So to figure out how to speak the language, and describe to the matrix mind what is actually happening is a very valuable tool for us. Because then if you can get the conversation started, you might be able to open them up to actually drinking a cup of ayahuasca, and that'll give anybody something to think about, especially with someone like Maestra Juanita. Um, that in her story, I don't think I talked much about that, is actually surprisingly similar to Mama Celia, except that Mama Celia had no contact with the outside world until 17. Um, but Juanita also was sort of orphaned by her mom with her grandparents who were shamans. That's exactly the same story that we got from Mama Celia. And started drinking at the age of 10. And little by little, poco a poco, I mean, it was crazy hearing this story because it was almost exactly identical with these two shamanas that are, I don't know how far Archidona is from Iquitos, but it's like there are archetypes, and these archetypes are formatted from the same circumstances. You know, I noticed that like John Lennon, Jerry Garcia, uh, there's a whole list of like those types of musicians that have very similar stories. No father, bad relationship with the mother. There's all these details. It's been a long time since I've thought about it. Jim Morrison, I think, is another one. You know, it's like the circumstances. I think people ask nature or nurture. It seems to be both to me. Like we come into the world with a certain fundamental essence, reinforce that. Actually, when we drank ayahuasca with Juanita last night, my partner said something really brilliant about how, you know, we actually end up in these circumstances that seem predestined. Because I think we both have a little bit of an issue with the idea of like a fully conscious universe being managed by some, you know, like direct, like director or something. I mean, it's not like it's something that's not entirely untrue, but it's not really satisfactory either. And she said something about how the universe actually has like the roots and the foundation, and the potentials play out by sort of adhering to this underlying structure. She said it a lot better, but yeah, um, I'm going off the deep end now, but nature and nurture, it's both. Um, yep. So, bottom line, basically, it's true what they say about the Shipibo. Now I kind of understand why people come to Iquitos. Um, they definitely are the kings of plant medicine, and they know it. They definitely know it. Um, but they're so far advanced in their understanding of what these things are and how to interact with them, um, that no one denies that. There's a lot of competition between the tribes, and pretty much everyone acknowledges. Everyone I've known has acknowledged that the Shipibo are really the true masters. And after what I witnessed the other night, I have to concur by a pretty wide margin. And I'm also well aware that that was just one ceremony. I'm really curious to see what it would be like to work with Juanita, um, long term ish, and we'll see if I can maneuver myself into that position. Um, Certainly, at least want to do some more ceremonies with her because it was really gave me a lot to think about. Um, but anyways, so if you guys have any questions for me that you want to throw into the chat, um, I'm down to answer them for a few minutes. And also, I want to remind you that you can also support Juanita and the other Shipibo in the market. The municipality is closing down the building where the Shipibo market is hosted, so they will no longer have a place to vend. Many of them do not have internet presence, so I'm getting our website back online, and we've actually started putting it together. So all these Shipibo textiles and weaving and artwork and backpacks and boxers. I mean, they put their, ayahuasca patterns on literally everything at this point. Most of the stuff is made from materials from the jungle and inks from the jungle, the traditional way. In fact, the entire time we were at Juanita's, what is the word that she uses? Aberge? Aberge? How did it differ from other shamans? Well, the Kofan, it's like this like fast babbling. I mean, it's kind of like Eminem in like his like fastest spitting mode or whatever, um, but weirder. It's interesting, um, but it's just this really rapid babbling. There are songs too, and then the Shuar, what really struck me about the way the Shuar sing in ceremony is that it really is one of the most convincing manifestations, I guess, I've ever witnessed of like interdimensional weirdness, like made real, Um, I was super bummed that I fumbled my phone when one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed still happened, and I didn't get it on the record on in time before he stopped doing it. I was really, really bummed, still bummed about that one. We have more likes than we do viewers. That's 2020. That's pretty good. Um, so what was I saying about? Okay, so the different singing styles. Um, the Quichua is almost just like their music. It's not dramatically different than just Quichua folk stuff. At least from what I've heard. Uh, but the Shipibo, Wanita at least, it was very. It could be bluesy. There were like different sections, like almost like verses and chorus, but not exactly. There was a much greater understanding of like how to use tension and release to trigger catharsis and to manage energy in the room. I mean, this is how really great jam bands work, actually, and jazz too. But like Fish has this thing that they do where they would like strategically use outside tones to build up to a resolution they could really lean into, and all this energy is released. The Grateful Dead did that with shifting into different modes over the course of 10 minutes or whatever. So that was interesting when I noticed that, that she's using a very sophisticated, intuitive knowledge of how tension and release works. Um, Also, the emotional connection, and this could be specific to Juanita. I mean, she's considered the highest possible ranking of Shipibo um, mastery of ayahuasca. That's probably part of that accomplishment is the commitment and the emotional, depth and substance of her singing. Um, and it's just generally more sophisticated. Uh, I'm talking mostly just from a technical point of view. So yeah, I mean the intensity of the energy, the emotional. Is that a monkey frog? I think I hear a monkey frog. That's the combo toad, by the way. There were lots of them around Juanita's house. The combo toad was all around, doing mating calls throughout the ceremony. I almost was tempted to go get one. They're just such sweet little creatures, very slow and um, but yeah. So did I explain that? And also the way that it connects with the energy and expresses the aesthetic of the ayahuasca realm. Um, it was more specifically expressive of that somehow. Um, but yeah, I uh, I don't know what to say about it beyond that. Um, Particularly that cleansing Ikaro, man, that was just so insanely powerful. And I really like that she seemed very personally connected to everyone. A lot of people, that's also probably because she hasn't had a lot of experience being a commercial entity. She's just been working in the jungle with local people. She's only just started working with foreigners in the last 6 months, it sounds like. So, um, she hasn't become like jaded or detached from the Mick ayahuasca. It's like after a while, if you do too many ceremonies, it's difficult for people not to start to feel like the ayahuasca ride at Disneyland or something. It happens a lot, even to like really good people. It's the same as anything else. Familiarity breeds contempt, and people become, you know, robotic and less committed. And for just the amount of time she spent, so what is the feeling of it coming on, and when do visions occur? You feel it in the gut, nervous system, brain. Um, that's a difficult thing to describe too, but for me, and a lot of other people describe this as well. If you're talking about just like DMT puro, the crystal, uh, there's a feeling of sort of like getting unzipped, or like when Velcro is pulled apart, and it's kind of a sound that you can feel, and that's when you know that it's like last night. The second cup, that's when I first, because the first one was so weak, I wasn't expecting much from the second one, and then when that feeling of like Velcro getting pulled apart, um, that's when I knew, like that feeling comes, and it's not in your gut, it's not anywhere. It's like your soul or something. It's really difficult to describe. But actually, before that, what happens usually is a snake. It feels like a snake is writhing around in your guts, and that's when you know that it's starting to work. Like you feel this like thing moving through your abdomen, and then if the visions are going to be strong, you get that DMT body load like ripping you apart. The good thing about that is that if you drink often, it kind of goes away. So, like if I'm facilitating through a month or something, I only have to deal with that feeling the first 2 or 3 nights, and then um, after that, it goes away. So there was another question I saw. I think I actually just figured out how to pull the chat back up too. Does the effect of the plant medicine differ from location to location? Is each tribe mixture different, or is it standard in terms of potency and effects? Um, yeah, it's different mostly depending on what type of vine is used. Yellow ayahuasca, there's white ayahuasca as well, which I think is very mild. I've never drank it, but yellow ayahuasca is what they drink here in the Iquitos area almost exclusively. It's also called cielo, and it's the easiest on the body. We didn't vomit even last night, even though the visions were like crystal clear, blinding entities floating all around my head, and the whole thing. No vomiting, and also when if I made it, it's usually red, and um, it's much more heavy on the body. You can kind of like get this weird sort of um, like stagger if you try to walk around. Um, and you vomit a lot, and it's a very deep vomiting from like the bottom of your soul. And I feel like that's important. I feel like, these things have different applications. So if you're just going for, to learn to sing Icaros, or you want to see how you play guitar after you drink ayahuasca, you know what I mean? For doing stuff and learning things and being able to get up and move around, ayahuasca cielo was definitely the go-to. But if you're really trying to get in some deep trauma and get that moving, then red vine is better. And then if you really have, serious issues, then black ayahuasca might be necessary. But honestly, I've never had black ayahuasca, and it's not even Banisteriopsis. Um, and actually, this is a little known fact. Ayahuasca cielo is Banisteriopsis copy, but red ayahuasca is actually Banisteriopsis muricata, and black ayahuasca is not even Banisteriopsis. So cielo ayahuasca is almost LSD like. No, no way, man. Nope. Um, I mean, sort of like, yeah, not in terms of the visuals and whatnot. It's not at all. It's, completely alien. There's entities on your head and stuff. I mean, LSD's never done anything like that for me. But in terms of like the ability to employ it for things that you need your physical, um, to be able to walk and function, then yeah, it's more like LSD in that sense. Um, so let's see if there's no more questions. I started to say that soon. Yeah, more user friendly to work on stuff for sure. Yeah, definitely a lot easier, way easier, physically. Um, but yeah, so email me if you're interested in coming to see Juanita, or if you're interested in any of the Shipibo art or textiles. Um, Before we get the website up, you can shoot me an email. We have some pictures in the community chat. I think I have uh, probably another day worth of work to do before I can get the website up. But when we have the website up, there will be information about Juanita's retreat. It's going to consist of 4 ayahuasca ceremonies for 7 days, or in 7 days, plus combo. Um, Bufo's not out of the question, but not. You'll have to skip the last ayahuasca ceremony, and there's going to be an intake where, because I am of the opinion that not everyone should smoke bufo. It's not, you know, we're gonna have to get to know you a little bit before that's even a possibility. So it's not off the table, but um, I think people are a little bit too loose with that. So it's a possibility. And then Shipibo Rape and one night of San Pedro. Um, so there's that, and then also the Cusco event. We're not exactly sure all the details yet, But if you want to be in the loop about that, you can send me an email. And don't forget also that I do consultations for people and mentoring in various subjects. So there's all kinds of reasons to become a patron too, you guys. Secret streams, 4 years of them. Masonic degrees are analyzed, and ritual magic is taught, and you can even take guitar lessons. We can do FaceTime. There's all sorts of wonderful perks of being a patron of Illuminastic, and you support my efforts to preserve this knowledge here in the Amazon rainforest, and all of the other wonderful things that we do. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and I'll see you again soon. Don't forget to hit the like button. Good night.